the two vents for the windshield defroster in. I'm starting to put the screws in the field here. I've got the two screws started in this bracket. I'll just gradually get these screws put in there loosely, finish fitting this thing up. A little chilly out here. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to work today, even underneath the heaters. Well, I've got this all screwed down to the firewall, and a couple of screws in the sides down here where it attaches the side panels on both sides. Got the defroster outlets put in, the hose is all hooked up there for that, and I've got the grommet in, and this is the power supply for the spider tracks. And I think maybe I might put a cable clamp on that someplace, but it's going to be kind of a pain now because I should have done that before, I guess, because now it's right here above that radio, so it's going to be a pain getting a nut on the back side of that. Anyway, that is all on. Oh, now I've got to do trim work. I've got to make the deflectors here for the exhaust, and I've got to make some kind of a cover to fit in here where this cutout is for this brace here that goes up, this framework here. I've got to have some kind of a cover over that. And then I'm going to put some trim. I think I'm going to put some of that welting in, the same stuff I put around the door, around the top of this boot cowl here. Oh, it's coming along nicely. I got it fitted up there. All the screws are going to go in now, and it's going to tighten on there nice. So, well, I got that boot cowl mounted up. It's all screwed on. I've got to roll it yet and tighten the screws on the bottom, but otherwise it's all up and on. I put some of that door welting between the instrument panel and the boot cowl, and I had a hard time getting that in around these corners. I took some thin aluminum sheet metal that I had and slid in there. These are relieved out around here in this corner of this instrument panel, and it pulls in tight against this boot cowl right here. It was kind of tough getting those in there, but I got them in. Here's that welting that goes around there. I think that finishes off that instrument panel and that cowling pretty nicely there. It covers up the gaps that were in here in this corner, kind of softens that up a little bit. And that's what was on the other airframe between the boot cowl and the instrument panel. Now I need to come up with some kind of a piece to fit over this gap here where this brace comes through there, and shields to deflectors to go over those defroster tubes. I'm going to go ahead and finish out doing what I need to do on that boot cowl, but I'm not sure I'm going to do anything with that windshield. Just too cold in here to work on that windshield. I think I don't want to be fooling with it cold and brittle. I'm just afraid that it might crack or something. It might crack anyway, but the cold is not going to do it any favors on working on that thing. So I'm thinking about a way to trim out this big opening in the top of the cowling here. We're looking at different ways of doing that. This is what they had before on the other airframe, and of course it won't fit on this one. They had two pieces here. This one went around the front, and then they had another piece that came over the back here on the pilot side of it. This is like 16 thousandths aluminum, and I've got some there. I was going to go dig out. I looked in the scrap pile to see if I could find something there, and I didn't really see anything suitable in the scrap bin. Well, I got to thinking that maybe I could use this Kydex for that, because it's kind of flat. It's black already. I don't have to paint it or anything. Got a little pattern to it, and it's flexible enough that I can just maybe make one piece instead of making two. So this is what I come up with. I just cut out this little pattern here. I got it split and just easily put it right in there like that. That looked like it worked out pretty good. So I'm going to get my hole locators and locate the two holes in here that go through that cowling down in the instrument panel. And then I got to decide whether I want to put a couple of screws out here or not, but I could just put a couple of sheet metal screws out here to hold that down, and that would work good. Well, anyway, I think that looks pretty good. And it's easy to get in and out of there. I got that little cover installed on there over that gap, and it was held down here through the boot cowl into the instrument panel with these two number 8 screws. And that might have been enough to hold it down, but there's a long overhang out here, and I was afraid it might start vibrating and flopping and stuff, and maybe making a little bit of noise and wearing. So I drilled a couple number 40 holes and put a couple number 4 PK screws in there just to hold that down, and that tightens that up pretty good. These are the deflectors for the defroster. They go right here. Now, I made a mistake on these. I took them in and sandblasted them, and it kind of got the paint off, but it kind of distorted them a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple new ones. But they go on just like this, just slightly over those holes right there, and then they call for instrument screws to go in there to hold those down. So I'm going to dig out some sheet metal. These aren't very big. They're, what, 3 inches wide. Anyway, it's just thin. I think that's 20 thousandths. So I'm going to dig out a piece of aluminum and make up a couple new ones. And I think I'll go ahead, all this stuff in this heat system here, like these rings here, I powder coated with high temp paint. I'll make these up and paint those, powder coat those with high temp paint. Well, I dug out a piece of scrap aluminum, same thickness as what those deflectors were. I took everything up to the basement and laid it out up there and cut out 2 new ones. Got them all set up and then brought them down to the shop, and I was going to powder coat them, but the regulator valve on my airline is froze up or hard. It's so cold in there that it won't work. So I got a fire going in the shop, and I got to get it warmed up in there enough to get my airline thawed out, or at least my regulator thawed out. The airline was working fine. While I was waiting for that, I come over here and I just went over all the screws on this boot cowl, made sure they were all tightened up. I hadn't tightened up those number 8 screws in the firewall screws down there on the bottom yet, but I just took my screwdrivers and went over all of them. The number 4s back there on the rear of that little panel, and all the number 6s and all the number 8s. I went over every one of them and made sure they were all tightened up. So that's all good to go. Well, I'll see if I can't get my airlines defrosted enough to powder coat those 2 deflectors and get those on, but until then there's not much else to do here. I got the deflectors for the windshield defrosters made up and installed. I made those up yesterday. It took a little bit more than I expected. I didn't have any trouble making up the deflectors, but when I went to powder coat them, my air regulator in the shop malfunctioned. I thought maybe it was because it was too cold, and it probably was because it was too cold. But I got a fire going in the shop and got it warmed up to about 60 degrees for 4 or 5 hours, and I still couldn't get the thing to work right. I dug out another air regulator that I had set up for an inline air regulator when I was out here working in the shop doing some stuff here, and I needed 2 lines, one with a high pressure and one with a lower pressure. Anyway, I hooked it up onto a different line, different regulator in the shop there. I managed to get these powder coated last night. Well, I got them on there now. I drilled the holes out 1/8 inch, and it calls for instrument screws to hold those down with. I used some of the regular stainless steel machine screws here that I used on here to thread those holes out with, because 1/8 inch is a little bit undersized for a number 6 screw. Anyway, I put them in with that, and then I got thinking about it and decided, well, I'd go ahead and put them in with the instrument screws. They're already painted flat black, so they won't reflect. That one down on that end is far enough away from the compass that it probably wouldn't make any difference anyway, especially since I've got stainless steel screws closer than that. But I went ahead and put some of the instrument screws in there. Now they're threaded right into the boot cowl here, so they're in there tight right now. But I'm probably going to want to go up underneath there and put some nuts on the bottom of them. That's only 32 thousandths sheet metal there. And then I got a grommet put in for this power lead for the spider tracks. I just drilled a hole out for it. I had some large button head pop rivets. I just put that in with a button head pop rivet, and I got a little tape around the end of it there to keep it from scratching up the paint there on the boot cowl while we're moving things around. Probably gonna glue a piece of Velcro down there for the spider tracks to sit on once we get everything together and get it in here. But it's still too damn cold, I think, to work on that windshield. I don't know what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna go get that fairing that goes in down here on this boot cowl. I think I'll put that inside fairing on there anyway, and see where we go from there.